A large portion of what you decide to and what not to decide to teach is determined by our California state standards passed through legislation, and the words that you need to teach are spelled out, among other places, in the standards document. So here it is. This is a particular thing that relates to solids, liquids, and gases. I've taken some portions of different grade levels here, but let's focus on one grade level for a moment. Let us focus on 5th grade. And I have this question for us. How many vocabulary words do you think that you are essentially required to teach during the year of 5th grade? The science words, just the science words. How many during a year, and how many per lesson on average? So those are two numbers that I want you to discuss. This is not a random guess, because you have a lot of experience in classrooms, don't you? You can draw on all your prior knowledge and think about how many words do I typically do in a lesson, how many lessons are there. So come up with a number, and I'm going to come around and I'm actually going to make a plot of it, of your different teams' results. So get ready to commit to a number in about 2 minutes. Okay. Whoosh! So our results of the tabulation, I might have mixed up which team was which. I apologize if you're not represented properly with your team. I wasn't taking as careful notes as I should have. So we've got numbers that range from 30 up to 200. Numbers per lesson, just for reference, of I think I heard from 2 to 18. So per lesson. So it sort of depends upon how many lessons you think there should be taught in science in a school year. But there is an answer. There is actually a correct answer to the total number in the standards document, and that number is about 105 words, which by my standard of the way that schools are talked about within LAUSD is that they are supposed to devote about 100 minutes of science instruction per week, which if you're figuring 45-minute lessons or something like that, you get 2 lessons a week. So 1.3 words per lesson. Higher or lower than most of you guessed? Way lower. Way lower. And some of your teams were right on target with that. But per lesson, not that many words required. So where do all these bold-faced words come from? There are millions of them. They're in the FOSS lessons. It's not like anybody has done anything wrong in here. They're there. So let's ask this question here, which is another one of these discuss with your team for a few minutes, so you can just sort of get a sense of why we need vocabulary in science. And we'll see what we can come up with from that. So just explore that question, and I'll come around and sit with a couple of you.
A dense, and then became like vapor, and then into clouds, and so I mean, I think it kind of connects the two, the vocabulary with the concept.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get everybody back together here. Okay. Whoosh. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go to about half of our tables to go through and sort of get some sense about what report out, what you discuss. And I'm going to sort of just go through these 3 tables here. So I would like to spend the rest of our time here showing you that you are all wrong. Okay. This is very important to see it from a different perspective. Let me give you the example. I think I have this as the next slide. Here. This comes from an actual exchange that I recorded in one of your micro-teaching experiences. An herbivore is an organism that only eats plants. Like a vegetarian? Yes, but it's an organism, and it only eats plants, so we call it an herbivore. Interesting. What is the point of language is to communicate ideas. That's sort of our short summary of language is to communicate ideas. So you want to communicate ideas as efficiently as possible. That's one of the things that vocab can help you do. But do we need the word herbivore if we have another one that's much more familiar to us that we kind of know? An interesting question. What's the difference between a vegetarian and an herbivore? Laura?
I think a vegetarian is making a conscious choice to and plants, so it's more of a conscious choice rather. Like, you would never really see a rabbit who's an herbivore, like, eating a steak.
Okay, so it's a very conscious choice. An interesting point. At the level of science of 5th grade, is that an interest? It might be an interesting distinction to make. But how many of you made that sort of a distinction when you were teaching that lesson about the word and introducing the word herbivore? Couldn't you have just used the simpler word? Maybe so. An interesting idea. Let me show you some other things. These are long quotes. They come from all the different experts on science education, telling you that science teachers should reduce, but not eliminate, we're not getting rid of vocabulary, the overemphasis on vocabulary and increase emphasis on conceptual scientific literacy. So overemphasis on vocabulary is what I'm trying to undo you of. You have probably experienced an overemphasis on vocabulary. This is a different way of putting it. Our goal is to free teachers from spending their time and energy on science vocabulary and let them concentrate on teaching meaningful science. And we were discussing this in the back here. I can ask, why is there water here? And the astute person would say, it comes from transpiration. Excellent. But you've given the correct label, but what is transpiration? Where did the water come from? You can use the word without any clue of what it actually means, except that your teacher, in this context, labeled that water in there as transpiration, and I've memorized that situation. Can I use the word transpiration in a new context? Not necessarily. Can I understand where the water really comes from and what role it's playing and why it's there? Not necessarily. And so this overemphasis on labeling it with a vocabulary word sort of hinders your ability to really talk about what's actually going on. You could say, what is that water? I could say, it came from the plant. The plant breathed it out. And they'd say, what? That's kind of weird. And you'd start to asking questions about photosynthesis and how that all works. It sounds kind of sort of dumbed down, but it's not dumbed down. It's actually much more sophisticated to say the plant breathed it out than it is to say transpiration, because one of those involves a sophisticated level of understanding of what the process is. The other one involves saying a tongue twister word like transpiration. An interesting thought. One other long quote here. Okay. Oh, this is it. Knowing vocabulary does not necessarily help students develop or understand explanations. So we came up in all of the comments that I let you share. I'm sure there were other ideas that might have been really exciting to hear. But all of them said it was really important to have that word to talk about so that you could introduce the concept. So let me see here. Let me borrow this here. So you gave this process of word introduced, then concept introduced. This big long quote here is essentially saying, what if we just flip it? Concept introduced, and then the word later. Why do it this way? Because you tell me this word, transpiration. Let's start the lesson. I'm writing the word transpiration on the board. You're going to give me a definition of it. Why do I care? So I can do it on the test, right? But language is there to help communicate ideas. You need to have an idea to communicate before you actually go about trying to label it. And this is how students learn, or not students, little kids, when they're acquiring language for the very first time. They have conceptions of ideas about things long before they can communicate that with a word. And they can recognize that that little tiny toy car looks the same and has lots of things in common as a real car, long before they even can understand the word car. But they just see that shape, and they see the other shape and say, those things have stuff in common. And then they learn how to label it. That's how students, or little kids learn. That can be how your students can learn as well, is create the need for a word and then give them a word if they actually need it. This way you're not introducing extra words that don't actually need to be used. You're only finding stuff that you have concepts that need to be labeled. So I'm going to keep going because I have a few more things, and then you get to tell me your reactions to all of it. But I want to tell you a story about this really cool study that was done. How many of you have taken microbiology? Ah, okay, someone has. Excellent. It's a very language-rich course. Lots of things to learn, lots of words to know. So an experiment was done taking this sophisticated majors-level biology course, not some non-majors watered-down thing. This was a serious class for people that were going on in biology to study and research biology, and they decided they were going to try and take all the jargon out of it that they could. So here's an example of a word, Thermophilic bacteria. How many people know what this means? We can break it down. We can follow an effective vocabulary strategy, and we can break it down. Thermo, you've got your little thermometer, so heat. And philic, you probably know pedophile. Phile, this is actually love or affinity for. Yeah. So, so pedophiles that love children, child loving. So, so we can do that, and we can break it down, and now you have a better understanding of this word, and it's really cool. But I had to go through a bunch of stuff, and I didn't give you any better understanding of this word and or this scientific concept than if I had just used. If I hit the button, does it do it? No, it doesn't. If I had just done, what could I have just said? Heat-loving bacteria. Heat-loving bacteria. Let's see here. Thermophilic. 4 syllables. Heat-loving. Ooh, I even save a syllable. So they did this. And do you think it worked? The microbiology class, they could succeed. They gave the students the same exact exam in this jargon-free microbiology class as they gave to people who were in a traditional microbiology class. Scores? Jargon-free was higher. Well, let's take a look here. I love this. This is a paper about getting rid of jargon. And what do they do? Anglicized and classical. So this means jargon-free everyday language, and this means the lots of words to memorize. Anyways, you notice that the scores, exam 1, exam 2, exam 3, who's got the higher bars? The jargon-free one. Anglicized, yes. So, okay, all right, that's fine, but this was this course, and do you think they could actually survive as biology majors? They had missed all of those words. All those words that they missed, that other students in biology, a very competitive major, they all got those words. They were taught them. So when we go on to the next higher level up microbiology class, how do you think these students did? Tortured, right? Wrong. They did better. They did better because they were able to pick up the language, the words, real fast. Because they had understood their meaning a lot better, a lot stronger. So your homework, it's not really homework, is to take this little sheet of paper, and I have given you a bunch of words that you'll take home here that are everyday words and then the technical jargon term. And I want you to circle the one you like better. And at the bottom, there's also 4 words that I want you to try and come up with everyday language ones. And we'll talk about it next time and see if it's easy to do, how easy it is. And you'll find, as a hint, it doesn't work every time. You need some of the jargon some of the time. And your job is to figure out which ones work. Okay.